In this video, I'll be sharing 5 tips on how to build an emergency fund. These 5 tips will not only help you build your emergency fund, but I will also be giving you strategies today so that you only use the money for emergency funds and for not anything else. Thank you for joining me. My name is Emily, and here at Savvy Cents, we are all about sharing budgeting strategies, money saving tips, and tools to live the life you want, and we want to show you exactly how to do that. So make sure to hit like and subscribe for our weekly videos. An emergency fund is a pool of money that's set aside for your family, dedicated solely to emergencies that come up. Tip number 1 is to set aside 3 to 6 months of expenses. So you're gonna have to determine what that looks like for you. If you're just starting out, then you're probably gonna wanna have closer to 3 months, and if you maybe have a small emergency fund built, maybe work more towards 6 months. I would say in the very end, it would be great if you had closer to 6 months, just so that you have a lot saved in case anything happens. What you're going to want to do is add up all of your monthly expenses. So if you were to look at your budget, it would be, if you were saving for your sinking funds, saving for a kid's college, all of those things would be put on hold during an emergency. So you want to look at just your expenses where you spend all of your monthly money. Like, for example, groceries, your rent, your utilities, basically things that you need to survive. And so those are what you're going to add up to equal 1 month of expenses. Let's say that your monthly expenses are trimmed down to $3,860. So that's 1 month of expenses. In this example, I'm going to multiply it by 5 to get 5 months of expenses, and that's going to equal $19,300. So that's our target number that we're trying to hit to build our emergency fund. And now let's also say that we have $300 to put in each month. That's going to take a little bit over 5 years to build the emergency fund. Now that might seem like a long time, but later on in this video, I'll share a few strategies to maybe build your emergency fund quicker. And also, it just takes time to build an emergency fund. So it's okay if it's not fully funded for a while. And one last thing in this point with your 3 to 6 months of expenses is when you have a big life change happen, it's good to reevaluate and make sure that that emergency fund is enough for your family to live on. I'm talking about each time if you have a child or a job change or you switch locations, maybe you live to a less expensive area. Make sure what you have in your emergency fund kind of still fits with your needs when you have big life changes. So tip number 1 is to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved. Tip number 2 is to decide ahead of time what that money will be used for. There's something really powerful in telling your money what to do, meaning assigning what you want to spend it on before something happens. It really helps you to be in control of your money so that when that emergency comes up, you know exactly what to do with it. So for our family, that looks like a job loss or a big medical or dental emergency, or an emergency with something with our house. This shouldn't be confused with normal wear and tear maintenance of your car or your house. It's really something that's above and beyond. To give an example, a few years ago, we were hearing strange sounds in the walls of our house, and we kind of knew that we had a rodent problem. So we decided to call the pest control people. They took care of it. The rats kept coming back. So one day I noticed there was things kind of coming out of our vents on the ground, and they did some further inspection, and the rats chewed through all of our ductwork under our house. And it was so unexpected. It was a health hazard, and we had to get it fixed. It was an emergency, and because it was something that we had not anticipated happening, and it wasn't like a normal maintenance or project that we had planned on doing for our house. And so that came out of our emergency fund, whereas the normal maintenance that the pest control had come out to do would be from our normal home maintenance budget. So that's kind of where it's above and beyond your control and you're not planning on it, is when it comes out of your emergency fund. So tip number 2 is to decide ahead of time what that money will be used for. Tip number 3 is to create a separate account for your emergency fund. I don't know if you've ever tried to save for anything, if it's all in one checking account, and it's really hard to keep track of. So if your emergency fund money is mixed with your savings or checking account, it might get all mixed up and it'll be easy to dip into and spend. And so it's really important to have it in a separate account. This could be a separate checking or savings account. For our family, we decided to put our emergency fund in an investment account. We just have it in a really, really low risk mutual fund that gets us very small returns. But the nice advantage of doing it this way is it's not linked to a debit card. And although it is really easy to access, we kind of have to go through one extra step to get the money out, versus if it was linked to a card, then I could just spend it whenever I needed something or considered something that was an emergency that maybe really wasn't an emergency. So it's really feels untouchable, even though it's very accessible. And the last thing I want to say is you want to have your emergency fund in that separate account. It needs to be a liquid account, meaning you can access that money anytime. So tip number 3 is to have a separate account for your money. Tip number 4 is to transfer your money automatically. I don't know about you, but I am all about simplifying things in my life, and if I can simplify my budgeting process, I will, because it already is complicated enough. And so if you set up an automatic transfer to save money each month for your emergency fund, you really don't even have to think about it. It takes a little bit of time up front, but then the work is done for you. And the other really nice thing about doing it this way is it's kind of like paying a bill where you don't even really consider it your money to begin with. So it's really great just to simplify your budget and to put another control in place so you don't spend that money on anything but emergencies. So tip number 4 is to set up an automatic transfer for your money. Tip number 5 is to remember that it will take time to grow, and make sure you take a minute here and there to enjoy watching that growth. If you're somebody who lives paycheck to paycheck and it's really hard to save money, I highly suggest setting up little rewards for yourself along the way. This could be something as simple as when you've reached a certain dollar amount in that account, treat yourself to some ice cream or a treat, or go out to eat with a friend or a loved one. Set up little things that can give yourself a reward and make you feel like you're making progress and seeing that progress. Because to be honest, growing an emergency fund takes time. When we started our emergency fund, it was not something that was built overnight. We had to just slowly watch it grow, and it's not always the funnest just to put money into something that is growing really slowly. And so it's important to make sure you take a minute to reward yourself and give yourself some credit for the work that you are doing. If you're trying to look for ways to build up that emergency fund quicker, look at your budget, find ways that you can trim, increase that payment each month, or if you get a bonus, split it in thirds and put a third of it into your emergency fund, spend a third of it and take a third of it and save for something else. Or if you get a tax refund, put a little bit in your emergency fund and throw it at that. I will say that when your emergency fund is fully funded, it gives you so much peace and contentment to know that if something were to happen to your family or an emergency were to come up, you would be okay. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have an emergency fund. It's something that will truly bless your life once you have it, and I know that you can do it. Please comment below with any questions that you have regarding emergency funds, any tips or tricks that have helped you build your emergency fund. We would love to know about them. Quick recap is the 5 tips of building an emergency fund is to have a 3 to 6 month of expenses saved. You want to determine what that money will be used for. Make sure to set up a separate account for the money and to set up an automatic transfer, and then to remember that it takes time to grow and give yourself credit for watching that growth. Thank you for joining me today. We would love for you to be a part of our community, so make sure to hit like and subscribe.